And now I give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to congratulate you on taking up the post of the President of the Security Council. I want to wish you every success in carrying out this function. We examined the contents of the report of the High Representative very carefully. And by the way, it was published once again very late and just before today's meeting of the Security Council. We'd like to once again point out the need to comply with the timeframes for submitting this report to the Council. We have to note that the document, just as its previous versions, has a certain anti-Serb tone. It is full of biased and politicized assessments and doesn't give an objective picture of the situation in the country. The Republika Srpska is once again stated as the culprit for all the difficulties that the General Framework Agreement for Peace is encountering. And what's particularly surprising, it's also the culprit for the major political crisis that has overtaken the Bosnian and Croat Federation. The choice of testimony to support the statements in the report remains unbalanced. Often it's based on unverified information. As a result, the real situation in the country is distorted, and a distorted impression is created of what is actually going on. This in particular pertains to the celebration of the Republika Srpska Day on the 9th of January, which took place in accordance with a law enacted in October of 2016. That law did not lead to any objections from the Constitutional Court of Bosnia-Herzegovina at the time. So the concern expressed in the report about the modernization of automatic weapons that the police of the Republika Srpska is equipped with is also difficult to understand. This process is taking place in full compliance with the laws of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this has been acknowledged also by those the European force that is in charge of security in the country. The fact that similar programs of replacement of outdated weapons of the police are also taking place in the Bosnia-Herzegovina Federation, for some reason, are not mentioned in the report. Now, we're quite surprised that the report mentions its concerns about the pilgrimage tour that took place in March of the multinational motorcycle club, the Night Wolves, that took place over Orthodox and historical places in Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And this topic is also for some reason mixed up with completely inappropriate references to unilateral American sanctions and the Ukrainian issues. The motorcycle club, Night Wolves, always coordinates its actions with the law enforcement bodies and has been conducting its motorcycle tours over the countries of Europe for several years now. These are purely humanitarian in nature. The main goal is to pay tribute to our glorious ancestors who defeated fascism during the Second World War. And by the way, today in Europe and tomorrow in Russia, and in the countries of the former Soviet Union, Victory Day is being celebrated. We call on the High Representative to focus his efforts on implementing the Plan 5+2, which should remain his top priority. Unfortunately, in practice, the High Representative has focused on other issues that don't fall under his mandate. It's strange to hear his public statements that in Bosnia-Herzegovina there should be less Dayton and more Brussels. To put it mildly, this is a very flexible interpretation of his mandate. As a result, we have an obvious impasse in implementing the 5+2 plan. In connection with this, we support the principle of transferring all responsibility for what is taking place in Bosnia-Herzegovina to the local authorities. We're also in favor of continuing to reduce the budget and personnel of the Office of the High Representative and in complying with existing conditions and criteria. We don't see any grounds for some kind of role for the apparatus of the High Representative. The era of that instrument has revolved. Madam President, the current internal situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, according to assessments of Bosnian leaders, is characterized by the most serious systemic political crisis in the overall Bosnian situation and in the federation since the Dayton agreements. This has in fact paralyzed this normal functioning of government bodies. It is based on an unprecedented degree of violation of the level of trust and cooperation between the three peoples that make up the federation. There's serious worries about the integrity of one of the key founding premises of the Dayton Agreement, and that is equal rights. This is a major source of concern since we are convinced that there's no viable alternative to the Dayton architecture for Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Dayton approach is fully applicable to the most serious practical problem, and that is the reform of electoral legislation in the federation. The key event in Bosnia and Herzegovina are the general elections to be held in October. These elections should be fair, free, and independent, including independent from foreign interference. It should reflect the interests of all the peoples of the Federation. The role of the international community in internal Bosnian affairs, I think, deserves a particular attention. The main function of the external presence should be to encourage the process of a true national reconciliation, strengthening mutual understanding and cooperation among all the peoples living in the country. Unfortunately, over the past few months, our partners, are taking a whole range of steps to directly interfere with the work of the Bosnian authorities. The most typical example is pressure put on the highest judicial council regarding the fact that its decisions are supposedly not in line with some sort of expectations. In connection with the reform of the electoral legislation, international mediators are also making a choice in favor of one of the sides, which cannot really contribute to an atmosphere of trust. Now, as part of coordinated efforts, the work of the Sarajevo or semi-secret burn process is not taken into account. This was initiated by a group of states last year. As far as we know, on the agenda of this closed diplomatic club include issues of broad constitutional reform of Bosnia-Herzegovina, which falls under the Dayton Agreement. And by the way, the representatives of the High Representative apparatus took part in this process but did not officially inform us. Also, there's no information in the report about that. Now, this kind of fragmented approach by the international security will not contribute to the goals of strengthening peace, stability, and security in the country or the region. We must be unified if we truly want to see this kind of unity prevail in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Madam President, in the context of, as far as procedural issues, in addition to the need to submit the report in a timely way, we'd like to also draw attention to a fragment in the report from the final communique of the December meeting of the Steering Committee on the implementation of the peace agreement in Sarajevo, which was not adopted by consensus. We would request in the future, in such cases, to provide in the report the corresponding references to the separate positions of member states of the steering committee. We would also like to propose to the members of the Council and all those interested to examine an alternative report on the situation in Bosnia-Herzegovina that was prepared by the Republika Srpska. It contains a very useful facts on a whole number of issues, including the financing from abroad of a range of media that have positioned themselves as so-called independent within Bosnia and Herzegovina. Russia intends to continue contributing to implementing the peace agreement in Bosnia-Herzegovina that still has significant positive potential in strengthening constructive bilateral cooperation with this country. Bosnia-Herzegovina has every opportunity to be transformed into an area of successful political, economic, and cultural cooperation of a whole range of participants. We hope that these chances will become a reality thanks to our common efforts. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Russia Federation.